Hi, I'm Ashley Hawkins, and I am the manga librarian. And today we are talking about middle grade titles. So we're talking about collection development for middle grades, meaning grades 6 through 8. So, those lovely middle schoolers. This is a highly requested topic, and luckily one that I have some authority in. I taught for several years in middle school, and I have done some collection development for middle school, so I know a bit. um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the particular challenges of middle school as a collection development band, and some advice, and then I will give you some titles to kind of walk away from. I do have a list, just like I did for the K through 5. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my sort of philosophy in terms of middle school collection development, and it may kind of be different from yours. So just kind of take what you will. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So we're going to just slide right in. Middle school is particularly challenging, right? Just in various ways. And I think part of what makes middle school particularly challenging is that it is a transition period. So you start off with students who are super, they're young, they have just come out of elementary school, they're babies. I've taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so I've taught the whole range. I actually taught a group of students where I looped with them. I had them as 6th graders, and then I sent them off to other people to be 7th graders, because 7th graders are crazy, and then I had them back again as 8th graders. So I've had that experience of like having them as these precious little angels, and then having them as young people. And I just kind of skipped the monster phase. So yeah, it's like I've seen like you watch them grow, and the thing is, because this is such a strange transitional time, we don't quite know what to do with them, and we want to protect them, but also we know that this is a time for them to really start understanding the world. And so I think as collection developers, we get nervous. I think middle school is really ripe for challenges from parents, because parents are still super involved and they get very nervous about what it is their kids are getting exposed to, particularly as their kids are starting to, be more adult-like. And so, it's never fun to deal with challenges. And so we just, I think, want to try and avoid them. And so that's what makes like collection developing difficult, because students come to us and they're going to want particular things. They're going to want things that are pushing boundaries, particularly when they hit 7th and 8th grade. And at the same time, that you're purchasing for a library that does also serve those little 6th graders who are innocent little babies. And you have to maintain a balance. And there's the balance of, okay, I want to let the students explore who they're going to become, and I also want to respect the fact that, these are still younger people, and my selection needs to be mindful of what should be present. So these are, like I said, these are all things we've got to keep in mind. One thing I will say is I mean, just be prepared. Like, we're librarians. We have to be prepared for challenges. Um, as long as you know the value of what's in your collection, you will be able to defend it. There's going to be a webinar later in August from Nixla and GNCRT that's actually going to go really in depth with this, with some experts on dealing with this. I think if you are building a robust manga collection, you're going to need to defend it no matter what, because unfortunately, there's going to be, depending on where you are, you're going to deal with people who have preconceptions of what manga is and don't necessarily know the value of it. And they have a preconception that all manga is porn, that it is inappropriate, that it is objectifying of women, and that's all stereotype. And it's going to require you to do some work, depending on your community. Now, for me, I work in a community where I don't have those issues, really. I don't have to defend my collection as much. First off, I'm at a high school. Second off, I haven't really dealt with any challenges. I just know my community and know what our limits are and where we can go and where we can't go. And I know where to direct students to the public library and so forth. So these are all sort of things that you've got to do. I will say, me personally, if I was running a middle school library, I'd have things like Demon Slayer, Naruto. I would have Demon Slayer. I would have Naruto. I would have My Hero Academia on my shelf. I would have those 3 titles. I'm not sure if I would have Jujutsu Kaisen. I definitely wouldn't have Chainsaw Man. I wouldn't have all of the big shonen titles that are super popular right now. But I would have some of them, and I would have justifications for why those particular titles were there. So for Demon Slayer, I would say that this is a story that deals a lot with family and has great values and also very beautiful art, and therefore I find it worthy of being in my collection. My Hero Academia is really about self-worth and positivity, and I find a lot of value in it. I'm not even a huge fan of it. Like, I'm not like a fangirl of it, I guess I should say. But I find a lot of value in My Hero Academia, and therefore it's one that I feel like belongs on a shelf. Now, that being said, it's not on the list that I offered to you, because it's up to you if you're going to add these titles that are going to be a little bit of a push, because they are more violent and there is some fan service in them, and you're going to need to make calls based on your population. So the list offers more safe recommendations, and then I challenge you to know what's out there and know what your community needs and be able to defend titles that are maybe a little bit of a push. Because quite honestly, I taught Hunger Games when I was a middle school teacher. I taught Hunger Games. I taught all sorts of texts that were a bit challenging, that had some violence in them, that had themes that, students needed to work through. And I think that we need to understand that just because it's drawn out on the page doesn't make it more, I don't know, offensive than when it's in a book. Because quite honestly, my imagination does way wilder things than what I see on the page of a manga. I can think of scenes that were in the Hunger Games that were way more explicit to me. Now, that may not be true of everyone. Some people kind of gloss over those details, so when they're reading, it's not as much. But it's not necessarily true of everyone. So just think about that. Think about what's in your prose collection, and think about, am I censoring a little harder on graphic collections? And am I not allowing really great stories to be present? But the thing is, you need to know that they're really great stories before you put them in. And also you need to know what things are your hardline no's. So, I talk about this quite a bit with other librarians. Like, there are some things that are hardline no's in my collection. One of them is non-consensual touching that has no consequences. So if that happens in a manga, it's not going to be in my collection. That's just a hardline no. So that's why we don't have 7 Deadly Sins. And I tell students they can go to the public library. It's there. Whatever. That, and I explain my reasoning why. I've had discussions with students about that particular title, and I've stayed firm on, there are just some things that I would rather not expose the entire community to. So, and those are my calls of, what I think are just no. And you can have those same lines too, and that can help you decide. But it's going to require you to read. Or at least be very aware. So, these are just kind of things to keep in mind. The reading system is going to be, I think, the least helpful to middle school librarians. Part of it is just every community is different. What flies in Brooklyn doesn't even necessarily fly in Staten Island, and what flies in Staten Island doesn't fly in Minnesota. Everywhere is different. And so, and I think like that middle grade area where the students are undergoing so much shifting and changing is where you really feel it. So we have to be mindful. So know your community. Know what's not okay in your community. Know when you're collecting fiction, what is and isn't okay, and what your demographic can handle and can't handle, or what topics are maybe taboo depending on, religious makeup or cultural background of the patrons that you serve. Just, these things. And I can't necessarily answer them for you. And these texts are coming from a place that isn't America, that isn't the United States. They are coming from Japan. They have different cultural values, and, they come from a place of different religion, different culture, a lot of differences. So, These are all things you kind of have to keep in mind. Demon related stuff is super hot in my library. Maybe you're in a community where anything mentioning demons is going to just be like an automatic hot button issue, and you need to be prepared for that. So these are just things to keep in mind. So, that being said, there are some safe buys. There are some titles that I think you can just toss into a middle school and you're good, you're fine, everybody will read it, you're not going to have any problems. And I'm going to talk about them. So let's do that. So first off, I wanted to talk about Flying Witch, which is one of my favorite manga. It's actually a very sweet slice of life manga about a witch. She's 15 years old. She originally was living with her family in Yokohama, but she goes to live in Aomori, in the countryside with her relatives, because in this world, witches go and they live outside of the home when they reach a certain age. It's very akin to Kiki's Delivery Service. It's kind of like a modern day Kiki's Delivery Service with a gentler touch. And it's just kind of her day-to-day interaction. So there's a little bit of magic, but also just kind of day-to-day life. So it's this day-to-day life kind of interspersed with magical things going on. And it makes for a very soft, nice read. It's funny in a very non-confrontational way. Like I said, it's a very gentle read. The art's really beautiful, and it's just such a soft, nice title. So this one's a really good one for middle grades. No fan service, no violence, nothing offensive. It's just a cute witch living with her family and kind of learning how to live on her own. Following that is a title that's a little bit wackier. Heaven's Design Team. So Heaven's Design Team is an interesting one, and this one is about the Heaven's Animal Design Department, which is it's this premise that when God created the animals, he outsourced the creation of animals to a different department. And this is a group of angels who are tasked with inventing animals. And I know that sounds kind of weird and religious. It's not. It's actually very scientific. So what they do is they have to figure out how the animals will work on Earth within the confines of science and physics, and it's actually very educational. It's very wacky. They're going through and they do things like they're trying to figure out, like, there's one character who really wants to make the unicorn happen, and then they explain like why the unicorn can't exist and why Pegasus can't exist, and how an animal can have like a super long neck, and just there's a lot of like science-based stuff, like here's why this can't exist or that can't exist, or why this can be this size, or all this sort of interesting science. And it's within this construct of, they're doing design for God, and God approves or disapproves of their designs. So that's one that I think is really great because, like I said, it's sneakily educational. You think it's like this really wacky story, but actually you learn a lot. The anime does a really great job of, like, they'll do the, like, sort of the story of like, oh, here's how we're designing it, and then they'll actually do like a little blurb where they look at the animal more closely and explain like, oh, this is what the animal is. So that's also a great one for anime clubs, and I think it's a great one for middle school. And yeah, so this is a great one for a school to have, I think, because like I said, sneakily educational. I love sneakily educational. And on the same note of sneakily educational, there's also Cells at Work. So Cells at Work is another sort of science-based manga, and it's all about the human body, and it's about a red blood cell and also a white blood cell, and their experiences helping a body function. And the series is all about like how the body works, set in this sort of wacky way where the red blood cell and the white blood cell and all the different functions of the body are sort of anthropomorphized, so that it's like there's this living ecosystem within the body, and you relate to them as characters, and it's really interesting, and also, like I said, super educational, sneakily educational, and it actually does really well with students. My students really love it, and it's perfectly fine for middle school. I will say there are spin-off series, and some of the spin-off series are a little bit less appropriate, but they're digital only, so the odds of you accidentally picking those up are pretty slim. So Cells at Work Black is the one that is a bit, it's about an adult body that is living a very decadent, bad quote unquote lifestyle, and how the body has to deal with when you don't live properly, when you do things like abuse drugs or have illicit sex or blah blah blah. So that series would be one that maybe would be more high school appropriate, but like I said, it's digital only, and I don't think it's available for the library market at this point. I think it's only available like the direct to digital market. From there, I want to recommend A Man and His Cat. This one's actually an all ages title, so it could also work for elementary school, but I feel like it fits a little better in middle school. I don't know. It's a really sweet story about an older gentleman who adopts a cat who has been in the pet store for a really long time, and the first chapter made me cry. But it's a very sweet, simple manga just about a man and his cat. That's really it. That's the whole premise. And it's just, they learn to love each other and appreciate each other. It's very cute, very sweet. It's a nice, mellow read. And then, I wanted to talk about the Shonen Jump title Spy X Family, which I consider to be a Shonen Jump title that is middle school appropriate. At least up until the point that it has been published right now, hasn't been anything really crazy in it that would make it inappropriate for middle school. Basically, it's about a spy, an assassin, an esper, and a psychic dog, who all are together as a family who, have kind of been brought together, and nobody really knows that the other people are these things except for the little girl who can read minds. So she knows that all this wacky stuff is going on, that her new adoptive father is a spy and her adoptive mother is an assassin, and she just thinks it's the coolest thing ever. And it's really great because, you know, you've got this little girl who's the framing device of, like, she's the one who knows everything that's going on. And that actually creates quite a level of comedy because there's quite a bit of her kind of making sure that her family's being maintained, because she loves having this wacky family of misfits, and she's very protective of it, but also she's just a little girl. And she's, you know, she's keeping her mind reading secret, and, you know, there's all these, like, wacky situations, and she also knows that she has a particular role to play and in terms of the spy's mission, and there's just all these really wacky things that are going on. It's very funny and also very action-packed, and it's just such a great series, and I think it's perfect for middle school. I think because it's not overly, even though, you know, there's a spy and an assassin as the main characters, it's not overly violent, and the comedy definitely softens everything. And I always feel like middle schoolers really love comedy. They love things that'll make them laugh, and the comedy just hits just right with this series. This is the only Shonen Jump series that I check weekly. Other Shonen Jump series, I'll, like, every once in a while I'll be like, oh yeah, I need to go read that. But this is the one that I'm like, oh yeah, it's Spy X Family Day. I've got to go read it. So I really highly recommend that one. And finally, I want to recommend the manga Children of the Sea, which is a really beautiful manga that looks very different from what you've probably seen, and it deals with children and an aquarium and a mystery, and it was made into a film. I'm not going to say too much. It's just very beautiful, and also it features a more diverse cast. So it's really beautiful, and I think it's an excellent addition to your. There are many, many more titles than what I've mentioned in this video on my list, so you can go click on the list. I recommend going through, reading the reviews, kind of looking at the synopses. You know, don't just blindly purchase. Like I said, if you're a middle school librarian, I think you need to, you know, have some thought processes. But I really do recommend these titles. They're at least worth you looking at them and considering them. So that's really it. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, middle school is tricky. And next time I'm going to talk about high school. I'm not going to talk too much about high school because I feel like I talk about high school a lot, and high school I think is, I don't know, maybe it's because I do collection development for high school. I think high school is the easiest. I feel like we have a lot of freedom, and we just have to not get anything crazy. Don't get hentai. But we'll talk about that in the next video. Like I said, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I am more than happy to answer any of your questions, and I will see you in the next video.